Hello and welcome back to the Lord Slar panel discussions. It has been so long since we've done one of these, but finally I've subjected myself to a new episode of Doctor Who. What is it like now? 2 years since The Vanquishers? Thank God that's all over. So we're in the first episode of the new RTD era with the return of David Tennant and Catherine Tate as the 10th Doctor and Donna Noble. And with me to discuss this brand new episode, we have Genesis of Androzani.
I am not wearing a single item of clothing.
And while you're getting a raging hard-on to that, allow yourself to be softened by Rory.
I'm only wearing underwear, so...
That's far less sexy.
What do you mean?
Well, fam, what's the brand of underwear?
I don't know, it's like from Primark, it's fast
There-
fashion.
there-
I'm a
there you
sweatshop
go.
user, I'm sorry.
Literally, like, 20 children have died for that pair of underwear, and you're trying to claim it's sexy? That's
It's not made of children's skin, like...
Okay, right. Very traditional start of panel discussion. So, like usual, we'll go through a variety of different topics around the episode, kind of discuss them until we get to an end and kind of come up with our final thoughts. So, I think probably the big one to go with, because technically this is a new Doctor story, is this isn't the return of the 10th Doctor, this is actually the 14th
Oh, I forgot
Doctor.
about that.
Yeah.
I
So,
completely forgot.
yeah, that's true. So let's discuss the new Doctor. Do you want to start, Connor?
Oh, well, I've never seen this actor before. Who is he? Yeah, I mean, it's... Interestingly... Well, I mean, I guess not. It's not unexpected, but they did absolutely no new Doctor stuff outside of, I have this new face, why do I have this new face? But there's none of that, like, trauma or anything. You know what I mean? Like, there's none of the, oh, I'm bursting at energy, I'm passing out, like, none of that stuff happens. I guess maybe you could say that all happens off screen before it, but I don't know. They don't do any of that at all. So, as a new Doctor story, it's very different to what we've had before, understandably, though, because this situation's never really happened, has it? I mean, I guess you get the Curator and Day of the Doctor, but that's a different circumstance, really. It's a bit more ambiguous, whereas this is an actual, like, this is the current day Doctor being played by an actor who's already played the role, but he's playing it looking older than he did when he played it. So it's a different take on a new Doctor story, but I don't even think that's, for the most part, that's not even really the focus. It's more about just, why do I look like this again? And I think that probably, a lot of that's just set up for when we get to the third part with the Celestial Toymaker, I imagine.
Yeah,
That's my guess.
I think it's probably a good decision not to make this a traditional new Doctor story, considering he's only going to have 3 episodes. And like we've done this whole thing before, this whole rigmarole. Let's just get the story. You know.
Yeah. The other thing is you have to remember is that Russell T Davies traditionally doesn't like to focus too much on that. I mean, in Rose and the Christmas Invasion, it plays a part in the story, but it's not a major part. It's not like, I mean, I guess the Christmas Invasion a bit more than the other two, than this one and that one, but it's never been like a dominating factor of the story. Whereas you look at like Stephen Moffat, for example, with The 11th Hour and Deep Breath, it's almost like the centerpiece of the story itself.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably just more Russell T Davies doesn't try to make it all about that.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not really that necessary, given the fact that David Tennant's Doctor as the 14th Doctor is fairly similar to the 10th Doctor. A couple of differences I noticed, which may be wrong and we've just not seen enough, but I think he's a lot quieter than the 10th Doctor was. He's a lot more kind of...
It depends on the scene. I think I would say there's a couple of moments, like in the TARDIS at the end, he gets very, very excited.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I am almost certain that's an actor ad lib, because apparently that whole scene where he runs around the TARDIS was the actor's idea, and regretted saying that after the 8th take, and as like a 54-year-old man sprinting around a room non-stop.
I think they just wanted to show how goddamn massive that set is. I watched after the special, I watched the behind-the-scenes stuff, and then I watched it with the commentary track, because, oh my god, look, there's so much extra stuff we get to, enjoy when it comes to Doctor Who. And it was really interesting watching it. That set is huge. It's like 5 times the size of the original 2005. It's massive.
They've certainly spent the mouse money, haven't they?
Oh, that Disney Books is coming in. I mean, we could talk
Yep.
about that in a bit, but like in regards to it being a regeneration story, it's funny because in regards to like where I'm putting this, like when I'm trying to think of the quality of the time I had watching it overall, I would put it like alongside a lot of series openers, like Partners in Crime and Smith and Jones, where they're like, it was good. I had fun. It was a good run around, and I feel like it felt like one of those. It didn't feel like a regeneration story. It felt like 2008. Honest to God, like it's wild how even though a lot of things had
Yeah, in
changed,
some respects it
they
did,
slipped
but
back
then
into it
also
so well.
it in some respects you could compare some of the tone to that, but at the same time, I mean, I know I'm sort of jumping around a bit, but it's all sort of connected. The fact that it's obviously 15 years later with far bigger budget, and it's Rachel Talalay directing, I believe. Am I correct in saying that?
You
It
are
was
I
Rachel
indeed.
Talalay.
believe so.
Yep. It's very like there is a noticeable. I think I saw somewhere online a comparison that was made that I sort of understand is that back in the day, like in the 2000s, you'd see multiple seasons of a standard definition TV show, and then at some point there would be like a film that came out based on that show that was shot in like large scale. This felt like a film version of the 2008 show, if you
Oh,
get
so
what I mean.
this is Dalek Invasion Earth 2150 AD then, is what you're
I
saying.
guess so.
I do get what
But
you mean though. It does feel like a
it's
yeah.
weird seeing these characters in like 4K HD. It's strange. It's a weird. It's a very weird
I
thing
mean,
to
I
watch.
get what you mean. It almost feels like kind of this could be a series 5 opener if like David Tennant just regenerated it to himself. Then it feels like not much has changed other than like the massive jump in filming quality.
They do
Because
make a few.
yeah,
They do make a few references to the fact that there's been 13 years between the times they've met. But
but I
and
think
there's
if things
bits
can be
like
deleted, like
It's
if you could,
15 really.
yeah,
yeah, I
like
mean,
probably probably
the
the
fact that you
closest
could
thing,
just delete
the
those
closest
bits
thing
of the
to it.
script and it wouldn't make a difference, I think
Yeah, the
shows that
closest
there's a
thing to
big
it was when
impact.
he said like, oh yeah, I had a bow tie, then I was a Scotsman, then I was a woman, and now I'm me. Like that sort of thing is probably the closest we got. Very vague, one-off references.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's not really that much more say on David Tennant coming back as the Doctor because
It's David
yeah,
Tennant.
it's
If
just
you've
David
seen
Tennant
him,
as
Well,
the
you've
I mean,
seen
Doctor.
him.
Yeah,
There's a few
I mean,
maybe
there's, I
different
mean, there's stuff
mannerisms,
to
but
say. There's stuff to say about what they did with him in the story, but in terms of regeneration itself, outside of that one scene he has with Ruth Medley's character, I can't remember her name now, but outside of that one scene, it's not really dealt with.
yeah, I think
I
that's
would
probably in
almost,
the episodes to come. I
I
think
think
this
she's
was
called
almost
Shirley.
yeah,
I
this is
almost wonder if like it's almost like they actually did more with the regeneration stuff in the Davros mini episode than they did in this whole thing.
it's true actually. Yeah,
They well in the commentary thing, David Tennant talks about because it's him, the producer and the executive producer, and they basically ask him, they're like, when it comes to like approaching this after 15 years or 13 years, I guess, since the specials, how did you approach, like, did you try and change it or whatever? And he basically said, well, I just sort of took it from the perspective of, well, I'm older, so it'll probably be a bit
Mm.
different just because I've changed as an actor, and also
Yeah,
Russell's been
it's
writing
almost
stuff in between and he's changed a bit as well. But like generally speaking, the actual sort of creative process didn't change that much. They just
well,
sort of
I guess
they
it's kind
winged
of
it a bit.
I guess it's kind of saying like if the 10th Doctor had lived another 20 years, what would he be like? I guess that's kind of what he was doing.
He'd be a TikTok superstar, baby.
God.
I tell you what, I think
Jesus.
this episode really is though is it's trying to be like the very normie friendly re-entry into Doctor Who because let's face it, Doctor Who
Mhm.
has completely fallen out of the zeitgeist at this point.
I
Like,
need, well,
yeah,
I can speak to this. My family sat down and encouraged me to put it on for the first time in a long time because they had seen all
Mhm.
the advertising and they wanted to watch it. And they had sort of caught from bits and bobs in the media that it was basically a soft reboot where they could get back on. So
Yeah.
if you want to talk about like, oh well, maybe it's just like if it's for the casual viewer. Well, the casual viewer actually decided to tune
Yeah.
in,
This
and
is
I beat out I'm a Celeb last night, by the way. Just curiously
this
looking
is
at
the
the
most
early numbers.
buzz I've seen like from people wanting to watch the show since Jodie's first episode.
Oh,
This
by
is why I
close.
mean
Not
there's
even close.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
context around this because when we talk about the last panel discussion we did, which was in like late 2021 or early 2022, something like that. The actual situation here has changed so much in the last sort of 2 years. Like the show was on its fucking knees
Really,
2 years
it
ago,
was.
and now they've suddenly got this injection of Disney money. Now, granted, it's still a gamble. They haven't actually necessarily like achieved in numbers what they want to achieve yet, but like the advertising, like I mean, I
Yeah.
know this is jumping ahead a bit, but we've got next week's episode, and people want to tune in for it, and it's like, and we also don't even know anything about it, but we know it's on, and it's on at Saturday prime time. Everybody,
I would say what's really going to test that is what the audience's buzz is once we have one full series with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor. I think that's when we'll know.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
David Tennant and Catherine Tate were basically
That's all novelty
bait
stuff
in the
that
trap,
that's
bait in the trap for the audience.
pre-established stuff with really good reputation among a lot of people. But once you get into a run of episodes with characters that are new, that's when you'll really test whether this has, that's when you just whether this really has legs. I think it probably will, but I don't know that for sure. But I predict that it will.
Okay.
Or at least more than Chibnall.
Okay, so I think that's probably enough on the 10th Doctor specific now. I know we kind of went a bit off topic, but that's, good. We got some good discussion there. So I think the next thing to talk about is probably what was the focus of the episode, which was all of the kind of companions / side characters, as it was almost like kind of not there. It was almost indistinct which was which, because we only got to know a few characters. So let's kind of just go through what we thought of them. Rory, if you'd like to talk about maybe the side character or companion you thought was most interesting in this story.
I don't want to talk too much about the past. Okay, it's the 60th. I'm being optimistic. I've been watching a lot more Doctor Who recently, as Dylan can attest, because I keep messaging him, asking him questions and stuff. But one thing, and we probably said this like when we did this discussion with Russell being back in the first place, is goddamn, it's so nice to have an ensemble, isn't it? It's so nice to have characters who I'm like, oh, like I like you, or this is entertaining, or this is fun to watch.
Just to be specific, all of the characters in this episode felt like their own individual people, and none of them felt the same. They weren't standing in a line like fucking planks reciting the same old shit.
It's genuinely a sort of it's a talent, because realistically, if you look at the written dialogue, like Donna's family and that, they don't really do much in the story, but they're reactive in the scenes. It's nice to watch. It's nice to watch people who react to what's happening around them.
It's so nice to have characters again. How many years has it been since we
got
characters
we got
in Doctor
Jericho.
Who?
We got Jericho for an episode in the Flux.
Oh.
That's like, this episode had like nice little moments and stuff with side characters that you didn't need to do. Like, you have that scene where the Doctor's going to the crashed ship, or the landed ship, I guess, with Donna's husband in the taxi, talking about like fucking Neris, and I was like, why do I remember Neris? Like, I remember that stupid line, that stupid recurring joke. I remember it.
He's such a tiny character, but Sean Temple, he actually acts like a person and talks like a person.
He must have had like 5 lines in The End of Time, and here he is again. I'm like,
scene when he's in the taxi when he's in the taxi with the Doctor, I was like, oh my god, this is a bloke I could actually like sit down and have a drink with and enjoy time with. Not like, that it's so refreshing to just have these small characters that feel like their own people with their own worlds and own lives that are separate to what we're watching, and we're just seeing like a few minutes of it. That is why character is so important, because if you just have these really hollow bricks that have no identity, it just becomes it's hard to really sink your teeth into the world if you don't actually believe these people have anything when you're not looking at them. It's like the thing of object permanence. It's like with the Chibnall characters, when
they're not in the scene, I forget they're there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when the camera's not looking at them, I don't believe they're doing anything.
To summarize my thoughts on the side characters, it was nice to have them, because we haven't
nice to have them.
any
Yeah, our standards have been put so low that just the basic function of having characters is amazing. It doesn't. Doesn't even matter if they're good. Doesn't even matter if they're annoying. Like, they're characters.
That's what I'm saying, man. I mean, we'll get onto the plot, but like the bar is so low that I'd like probably in a vacuum this episode is nothing special, but compared to what we've had for a long time, it feels amazing.
We have been so starved of slightly above average Doctor Who for so long that having slightly above average Doctor Who feels amazing. It's like therapeutic.
It's true. I mean, to kind of maybe go through some of the characters. I mean, Donna. I mean, she was always good in series 4. One of the few New Who companions I actually quite like, and was just back here on form.
Catherine
very good
amazing,
and very good range.
I didn't. Obviously, I wasn't a big fan of the whole Dr. Donna stuff from the Soul Nerve Journey's End, but it's already there, and I felt, it was handled fine. Like, I don't like that it existed in the first place, but it's handled fine for what it was.
It's a tricky thing to do because it's quite a gnarly concept in itself, and it even was at the time. So when you're bringing it back, especially when there's not like the sort of, I've always found the rules around it a bit cloudy because it's kind of, you don't really know what is and what isn't, and almost don't know if the Doctor knows either. He seems to say it with such definite concern in Journey's End, but then End of Time Part 2 happens and it kind of makes things a little bit less certain. And then that was the one thing when I was watching this episode thinking about Donna's memory, I was like, I don't really know what the stakes are. I guess they do change them in retrospect, but on first viewing, when I'm only thinking about what I know from previous episodes, it was difficult to fully understand what point does it become dangerous.
Yeah, like have they confiscated all the plumbing, have they confiscated the plums from the house so like her head would explode when she sees the Bastion plunger?
You have these moments where Sylvia shows a lot of concern, understandably, and the Doctor is a bit reckless with it, and I can't quite place how much leeway there is for that. But I guess
if you want to apply your own headcanon, because it doesn't say it explicitly, I guess he's just dumbed it down for Sylvia and just been like, if she remembers she dies, so she be precautious. But he knows specifically, so he can do what he wants.
I do understand that from a sort of a mechanical level, but it's just the fact that he says it with such sincerity as well. When the first time he explains it to Sylvia and Wilf and Journey's End, it's very serious.
Well, I think that's probably highlighting one of RTD's flaws, the fact that he's very good at writing himself into a corner, and he wrote himself into a corner in 2008 with this. And
it's like
kind
handing Donna
struggled out of it.
I think it's because it's a very complicated thing to handle anyway, but the main issue is the fact that, I mean, it's been addressed before, but the way that it's handled in End of Time Part 2 is very different to how it's set up in Journey's End. So when you're going into this episode, I'm thinking, what version of this am I watching?
It's like when he hands her a sonic screwdriver in the living room. It's like, are you pulling a pin on a grenade and chucking it in her hands, or is she just fine with that? Because it looks different, and it does look different, I guess, to what she's seen in the past. So
yeah. You did bring up something, actually. I will say I do think they have made the sonic screwdriver very overpowered in this episode.
We'll get to that, I assume.
Yeah,
it's
I think
not
maybe
the most
that'll be involved in the plot.
It's not the most egregious example of it of all time or anything. It's not like a game-breaking thing, but the main thing I would say is that it just does a lot more things than it should. It's just too advanced at this point.
In regards to side characters, Jacqueline King, who plays Sylvia, she's great. She just looks really terrified for an hour that her daughter's going to die in front of her. And it's like, please go away. Please leave her alone. Why are you here?
I was quite surprised because in Series 4, I didn't really care for her character that much. I didn't dislike the character. I just wasn't bothered one way or another. But I actually quite enjoyed her here.
Dylan, when was the last time you watched Turn Left?
She is really good.
She is good in Turn Left. To be fair, but I've always loved
really good in Turn Left.
It just maybe all the other episodes where I wasn't so bothered about it.
What I would say, sorry, go ahead.
It's because a lot of the episodes before Turn Left are setting up that sort of more serious side of her that you didn't see before, and you sort of understand the context of why she's so harsh on her daughter, and then after that point, you start to see the more sort of well, she's doing it because she's being overprotective. And now in this episode, now that she's older, and she's now, instead of being just a mother, she's now a grandmother as well. It's a slightly different version of Sylvia.
I definitely got that.
I actually quite liked how they handled because obviously one of the biggest things about this episode is Rose Noble's transgender identity, and the way that they had Sylvia as the grandmother sort of be slightly out of touch but apologetically out of touch was quite
It's
well
such a
done.
good scene. I really like that because
like,
it feels real.
Yeah, sometimes like that sort of doddery old perspective on it. It's very similar to that scene in Years and Years with Tania Miller's character and the guy who plays Stephen Lyons. I can't remember the actor's name, but they have a trans digital daughter or something, and it's like, we're a bit old, we don't really understand how this works, but we'll listen to you because you're our daughter. And she's like,
well, one thing I did want to say on that character is it Rose Noble. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, she played quite a big role in the plot by the end, but that was one of the only side characters I really didn't feel like I knew, because practically all of her lines are about the fact that she's transgender, and that's like fine that they talk about that, but I don't really know much about her other than that.
There was one other thing about her, but I have a feeling that it might get more explored in The Giggle, and the reason why is that you may have noticed that her passion is being a toy maker.
Yeah, that could definitely come back. But
I think there is time to really focus on her character. The one thing I really want to say about her that I hope gets explored, because it didn't get explored here, is the fact that she felt like she could relate to Beat the Meat because Beat the Meat was an alien that felt out of place. And that links to her sort of being transgender. I mean, like, sometimes I feel like an alien. The part that I really want to be explored is the fact that Beat the Meat betrayed her.
Yeah,
we never really got any focus on that. Yeah, we didn't get any focus on that.
It's a consequence of time, I think. Like it felt like if there was, I could see where some of the cuts definitely happened in the episode, and that was sort of one part where you should have got more reaction from the family.
This is definitely an episode that I think if it was 10 minutes longer, it would be better.
Yeah, so it's like you were saying earlier, Rory, about one thing being much better is the fact that characters are reacting to things, but I think that's one of the reasons why her character struggled a bit. She doesn't seem to react to things very much. And I think Connor's right. Give an extra 10 minutes, you could probably explore that much more effectively.
Well, I think
as it is...
Sorry, go ahead.
Having said that, they may explore it in another episode, but that is just an example.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fine to say that they're going to explore it in another episode, and that would be okay if she was a character who had been introduced, but they hadn't really done anything with her. But we got to remember, she was like very important at the climax of this episode, and yet I still don't know her. And I think that's a problem. You've got to know a character if they're going to play that bigger role in the story before
that made the climax feel very rushed as well because of that lack of time spent really digging into that side of her.
I think in regards to characterization, I would agree. It wasn't like she didn't have the strongest characterization. Yeah. I mean, and I guess maybe I'm being more lenient with this episode, admittedly, because one of my sort of complaints about Chibnall was always his rushed conclusions, and this conclusion was definitely rushed. But in regards to Rose and the unit officer Shirley or whatever, Rosalie Davis has basically already said that they're going to be semi-regulars in the new show, so I assume we're going to get more.
I don't doubt that he's going to characterize her later. Like, I know he's not Chibnall. I know,
but they should have probably been more for an introductory episode.
If you're going to have her be important to the plot in this episode, and I mean like critically important to how it's resolved, the characterization needs to be before then. Otherwise, it just kind of feels very awkward for the audience. Like, this character you barely know, all of a sudden is saving the day. Like, it's just it's not how you do TV.
I guess maybe because of the runtime, they wanted to make the sole focus about that one specific thing about her.
When you compare the scene at the end to Journey's End, which is basically a completely identical scene. In Journey's End, is whatever complaints people have about Journey's End, is Donna becoming this sort of competent sort of genius is meant to, like, it plays very strongly in contrast to the character that we know Donna is up until that point, and that has an impact because of that. But we don't really have that with Rose. Like if she was sort of a bumbling, sort of quiet character beforehand, and suddenly she becomes this confident genius or whatever, there's a contrast there. But because there isn't
Yeah.
really a great exploration of a character before that point, it doesn't
Yeah,
hit the
that's true,
same
because in
as it
Journey's
does in
End, you've
Journey's
got a
End.
character that's been around for a whole season and you know them very well.
Yeah, and it's a
Whereas
stark
here,
contrast.
you've just met her.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're kind of hitting the nail on that because I wasn't quite sure what I didn't like about it, but I think we've kind of got there now.
What did we make of
Yeah.
Ruth Madley?
I will say though, I do think Yasmin Finney's performance was good though. I was
Yeah, she was.
impressed.
Yeah, there was a
Everybody
couple of awkward
was
lines
good.
here and there, but yeah, I mean, I felt she was better later in the episode. There was one line that really did stick out like a sore thumb, like when she was saying "Who's there?" Just before she finds Beat the Meep. I felt
Oh
like,
yeah,
could
that
you not
scene
have
felt
had
like
another take? Could you
But
not
then-
have had one more
well,
take?
Yeah.
Again, thank you for watching the commentary tracks and the behind the scenes stuff. Again, thank you, Doctor Who Disney Money, for allowing us to have that. That was the first day of filming. They talk about it, so I guess
Yeah.
probably that was it. Like she hasn't quite.
Yeah, she
felt-
grew into
She's
the role.
She's quite young, isn't she? From what I
Yeah,
remember.
I mean the
She's
cat.
like
Oh,
18,
that was
19
that was
somewhere.
another complaint I would have. Is I think canonically she's meant to be 15. I definitely saw her more as like an 18, 19-year-old, like maybe in like the end
Definitely.
of college, opposed to a 15-year-old. But yeah, I don't know. Kids these days.
Well, it's like Zoe's like meant to be 15. Like, you know, Doctor Who's
Yeah.
done iffy ages before. Less like my eyes can glaze
Well, I mean,
over
bloody.
that way.
What was it? Bloody in Sex Education? Shooty Gatwa's character's meant to be 16, and he's what, like 28, 29 when he filmed that.
What? I
To be
haven't
fair-
seen
to
the
be
show.
fair-
I've only seen
to be
clips,
fair,
but I don't get
listen.
16.
Listen. I've watched Sex Education, although not the latest series. And Ncuti Gatwa is like in his late 20s playing Eric, but he does sell being a teenager very well.
Yeah, his performance makes up for the fact that he's not a teenager. It's also hilarious how Tobey Maguire is supposed to be a teenager in Spider-Man, but he's like 30.
Are we including for side
What?
characters? Are we including Meep and Co, or are we saving
Well,
them
no,
for the
no.
baddies?
I think we can probably move into that now.
Well, I
And just
think we
kind
need a
of...
quick word on Rachel Madley because we haven't talked about her yet, and she's going to be another
Oh,
recurring
yeah.
character.
Yeah,
And
I forgot about
I liked her. She was fine. I like that when she meets the Doctor for the first time, there's no like, oh, who are you? What are you doing here? It's just, oh no, you're the spaceman because of course you are.
I definitely got the vibe she was the kind of character that would appeal to the young audience. She's very.
She was very Liz
obviously-
Shaw coded. I thought she reminded me of Liz Shaw. I don't know why. It was the
Which, by the way,
the
Liz
bluntness.
Shaw Erasure, she was the first scientific advisor to UNIT.
Actually,
not the
yeah,
Doctor.
they said the Doctor was numbers like the first one. I was like, no, Liz Shaw, if I remember, in Spearhead from Space is made the scientific advisor before him. But she did that
Yeah,
character
take
did
that,
remind me
Russell.
of her.
Take that. You've been defeated. Right, all the episodes bad now because of that one line.
I mean,
Also,
unless you unofficially the
I'm going to
invasion.
shout in his face if I ever see him and tell
I'm
him
going to
that.
scream at him.
What
gonna make
if you
him
count
go
the
and, like,
invasion as
beg.
him being on like a
Caroline
the
John's
invasion as
grave.
him being on like a one-term contract?
All right. Oh yeah. So Ruth Madley, is that the character's name or the actor's name?
No, her name's
That's the
Shirley
actor's
Bingham.
name.
Or Unit Scientific Advisor number 56, whatever.
Yeah, let's just call her Unit Scientific Advisor number 56 because it's going to take me ages to remember all the names. Yeah, I mean she was alright. Certainly an energetic performance. Again, don't really know if I
Actually,
know much about her as
one
a
thing to
character
link
other
to
than
her
she's
character with-
very confident.
One thing to link to her character, which I think we'll come back to later, but it sort of plays into the larger point of the reactivity of the world, is there's a moment where they're going to go up to the ship, the unit soldiers, and he's like, oh, sorry about the stairs, you can't come up because of the stairs, and we're in a steelworks, and it's not very disability friendly. And what's really funny is I literally like said that to my like sister like a minute before. I was like, she's not going to be able to get up there, and like it was just nice to have that. Again, like it feels like they're real people reacting to the world they're in.
It's not like
and-
Ryan's dyspraxia.
Well, whenever he's on a conveyor belt, his dyspraxia disappears.
There's a characteristic of the person, and that affects the world, and vice versa. And it was really fun to watch. And it comes up again later on, and we'll talk about it later
Also,
on because
his
it happens a few
wheelchair-
times in the episode. And again, it's that contrast between what we've had and what we've got, where it's not a big deal, but it was nice to have.
Also, she has weapons in her wheelchair.
Based.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, that was fun. Again, I don't know how of much of a fan I am of the character yet, because I don't feel like I've really got to know her yet.
Yeah,
We'll
she was
see what
fine.
happens in later
She
episodes.
didn't have much. I assume she'll be in it more.
Yeah,
She is,
again,
so-
there was a lot. There was a lot that happened in a very short space of time. So it's hard to say.
it's quite difficult. One thing I will say though, on like to praise, is that she's already a better character than any of the unit era, Moffat era unit team.
I'd agree with
I was gonna say, mind yourself, Dylan. Don't you disparage good old Benton.
Yeah. Oh no. Like obviously, like classic Third Doctor unit, the best. But like Moffat unit, I mean, I don't know why everybody was going on about Kate Stewart. I thought she was a terrible character. I mean, she's just like.
Well,
I'm
she's
not
going to
getting into
appear
that now.
soon, so we'll see how
Oh,
Russell
she's going to
handles
appear
her.
again, so we'll have. Hopefully, she's good this time.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, let's move on and talk about probably the most neglected part of the episode, the plot. Would you like to start, Connor?
So the thing about the plot is it is an adaptation of a comic book of the same name, I believe, and it is one where I feel like a lot of us were not as surprised by it because we probably already knew what was going to happen before it did. So this is probably one that would appeal more to a viewer that has no idea what's happening, because the subversion is that Beat the Meep is actually the villain, and these. I can't remember the names of them. They're like Zeroconians or something.
Wrath Warriors.
Those,
The generic aliens this week.
yes, the insert insect monster here villain.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So that the subversion is that Beat the Meep is actually a villain, and they are hunting down. Interestingly, it's a bit like Fugitive the Jadoon, actually, but.
Oh,
Because
what? Are you
it's the
seriously
same
going to
thing, isn't
besmirch this episode with that?
I don't know why that made me think of that. Anyway, but yeah, so it's got that in it, and they use Beat the Meep as a sort of, firstly, to link together the sort of the toy maker part of it with Rose Noble being making toys, I guess, which will come up later. So Beat the Meep looks a bit like a toy. So she Beat the Meep's in Rose's toy shed, and there's that whole scene where Donna thinks it's one of her toys she's made,
That
and then
was funny.
pokes her eye. That was pretty funny.
Well, actually, there's one thing. Can I just pause you for 1 second? How good was it to have bits that were genuinely funny? I haven't actually laughed at Doctor Who for 5 years.
Yes.
Oh my god, that will fake out got me good. Like I was like, he's not dead.
Oh,
He's in a hole. He's 94. What are you talking about?
A lot of this episode was quite lighthearted, but that was RTD's like edgelord coming out just slightly. That it's the RTD that decided to kill all the Voyage of the Damned side characters that came back in that scene.
It's a Poseidon adventure knockoff.
Like,
You've got to kill all the characters.
The small cactus man and the fat couple, they're gonna die too, and Max Capricorn and Kylie Minogue, they're all gonna die. It's that side. But yeah, so the subversion obviously, and one thing I love about the scene that is the subversion, and I'm sure Dylan you'll appreciate this. They did a callback to the courtroom scene in the Stones of Blood. And the Doctor put the wig on and did an entire trial with Beat the Meep, which exposed Beat the Meep. I thought that was quite fun.
Yeah, and choose the most scenic location for it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dylan, as a watcher of the behind the scenes and commentary track, they talk about the car park and how initially it was meant to be outside, but because they were filming in the summer, they didn't have enough nighttime shoots because obviously there's less night light in the summer, so they didn't have enough time on the schedule to film it outside, so they had to move it to a car park and film it underground.
It is.
So there you go. There you go.
It is certainly a downgrade from doing a court scene in hyperspace like they did in Stones of Blood, but regardless, that was fun. But the big thing about the plot that I think a lot of people seem to agree on is how rushed the conclusion is. There is character motivation behind it. But I and a lot of people found it quite confusing when it was happening, and then upon thinking about it, it was very. I think what Russell is trying to do, and I can understand he's good intentioned with it, but he's walking a very sensitive line when he's trying to link a very complicated idea he came up with 13 years ago with a trans allegory now, which is a sensitive personal issue. And he's doing it because the meta crisis has there's somewhat of a parallel between that and being a transgender person and the whole binary, non-binary thing. And so he's sort of found a way to link the two things together, but the way he did it was quite rushed, and the plot just sort of ends very quickly. And like you said, Dylan, because Rose Noble wasn't fully developed as a character when it happened, it doesn't seem to fit right. And that for me is probably the biggest negative of the episode, is how the plot kind of wrapped up. It was like very sudden. Do you get what I mean?
The age-old issue, isn't it, of New Who just not having enough time to do what it wants to do. It's like, if you want to have short Doctor Who episodes, fine, but they need to be like very hyper-focused, kind of low-scale things. They just try to do too much a lot of the time, and this episode unfortunately fell into that trap.
It is interesting though. The interesting thing from a character perspective, though, that the Doctor was actually willing to sacrifice Donna, and without knowing that there's a reason why she didn't die after, because obviously it's something to do with, the daughter and all that stuff that happens after. But there is that scene where he's stuck with the decision of, well, I have to save all these people, therefore I have to kill Donna. Is that why this face is back? Do I have to go back and kill her again? Do I have to rewrite my mistake? Or just because that was, back in series 4, he chose to wipe her memory so that she wouldn't die. But here, he's having to make a choice of, well, if you don't kill her now, then all these people will die. And that's when that big sort of frustration happens again with the, why does it have to always be me?
Yeah, that was a good moment, actually. I thought it was very well acted.
Yeah. I think with more time, there's a lot more interesting stuff to explore here. Like with Donna, for example. I don't know if you guys remember End of Time, because, I assume you have certain opinions of End of Time.
Unfortunately, I do.
And that sort of post-Journey's End Donna, where it's basically implied that by wiping her memory, she sort of reverts back to sort of runaway bride Donna, where she's a bit sort of... She's not, like, ignorant or anything, but she's normal. You know what I mean? She's a normie. She doesn't really...
There are still, like, you can see in this episode, there's still elements of it in there, but it's hidden away.
Yeah.
It's almost like a subconscious.
They even have like a throwaway line where she's like, well, it's not a throwaway line because they constantly talk about the money through the entire time. But she's like, the reason I gave away my money wasn't because I particularly wanted to give away my money. It's because I was basically like subconsciously tricked by the other version of me to give it away, to be more like a person I don't remember. And they sort of have this. They sort of hint that like Donna, as a consequence of, I don't know, having a kid and being up in a difficult circumstances, sort of grown as a character and changed. Yeah. And she has clearly changed, because she's not the same as she is at the end of Time, where she's just sort of back to runaway bride Donna. And it would have been nice to explore that, because it's clearly
it's created a really interesting version of Donna where she's gone through 13 years not knowing about all this time, and she's developed as a character off screen in that time without the Doctor. And this whole lottery thing of her giving it away has made her frustrated at herself and the situation she can't remember. It's quite a unique thing.
And with more time, they could have explored it. But on the sort of the plot as a whole, it definitely, this is why, again, it feels like a season opener or like a regeneration story, in the sense of like, it doesn't really... A lot of the plot is very throwaway. Like, it's just a run around, isn't it? You've got to beat them.
Yeah. Well, as I said,
good guy, but then bad guy wants to kill the world to get off it or whatever. It's not like or kill London, I guess, not the world.
It's an adaptation of a comic that presents itself as one within the plot as well as the tone, and I think that is part of it.
We segue into just like, obviously as part of the plot, talking about like the meep and whatever, because
sure.
on the one like one thing, Miriam L. Girls was class. And the heel turn she does with her voice when it's like, oh, she's bad now, is really, really good.
It was good. Like, Meep was, like, definitely, even though I felt a lot of the Meep plot was kind of shoved to the side, kind of rushed and stuff, the Meep itself, I felt, was, like, very fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, because the plot and the whole thing, we can talk about the Wrath Warriors and the big street battle or whatever, but God, the budget has noticeably skyrocketed here.
Jesus Christ.
A lot of it looked... I don't think it's looked like. I mean, you could argue stylistically it's looked better, because when people talk about like the Robert Holmes era, there's no money, but there's a lot of atmosphere in how it looks.
Well, also remember, it's not just about budget. It's Rachel Talelia's direction. She's a very, very class director.
Yeah,
and
there's a lot of really
nice. It was so nice to have a camera actually focus on what was happening.
I know you put that out there.
Not
sorry.
Me.
I was just saying, like, the camera was actually focusing on what was happening and was framed right.
I was
You
going to
know?
talk about the action scene on the street and how well choreographed it was and how clear it was,
It
because you
wasn't
have
even a
three
focus,
different
and it was,
factions.
yeah.
You have three different factions fighting each other, and there's no scene where like the story feels need to tell you that, oh, by the way, the normal unit guys have clocked that the bad unit
Yeah.
guys are bad. There's that scene where he gets sent away from the pod and he's like, well, that's weird, and then he comes back and he says one line about how they're hostile or something, and they just start
Yeah.
shooting each other, and that sort of entire action scene is so well choreographed and it looks
Yeah,
so
and
good.
also, unlike, and I know I caused a big ruckus on Twitter with this, not just me but others, but unlike fucking Wars of the Sontarans and Eve of the Daleks, there wasn't any like ridiculous, unbelievable levels of plot armor. Like
True.
there was.
Well,
It's so
well,
easy to avoid. It's so easy to avoid because you
thing
just
is, let's
don't
put
film
on.
Yeah.
people at point
Yeah.
blank range.
Like
It's
the way they got
simple.
around it. So there was two ways they got around it. Firstly, now obviously I had to complain about how the Sonic is too useful, but if you take that out of the equation, he built these shield walls so that they wouldn't get hit in the house, and then later, when he goes to check the pulse, at that point he starts to suspect that they're stun guns, not murder guns, which is why he takes the risk, and therefore they're not dodging
Yeah,
being
well,
killed; they're dodging being stunned.
there
Yeah.
was one moment, right? There's a moment, and I said it myself, and I thought, oh, here we go. And this, I guess it's like PTSD from Chibnall. I don't know. Where they get in the taxi, and the warrior guys, the insect boys, are firing at the taxi, and I'm like, why is it not damaging the taxi? Why is it not doing any damage to the taxi? And
Mm.
I was like, and if this was Chibnall, they just hand wave it away. They don't bother. And then in the next scene, it's like, oh no, there's a reason. There's a reason why I didn't damage a taxi,
Yeah.
because they're not trying to kill anyone.
It was meant to be something that the audience sees and thinks, wait, that's a bit odd. Surely an alien gun would have more
Whereas
effect on just
whereas
a
if
taxi.
this
And it's like,
episode was
oh, yes, it would. There's a
Whereas if
reason.
this episode was written 3 years ago, they would hand wave that away, and they would have a certain set, like a cutaway scene of the unit
Yeah,
guys going
and
be
we
like,
would
"There's bad
fucking
guys here, there's
complain
good guys
about it.
here."
We would complain about it, and people would say we're nitpicking when the actual reality is you can do stuff like this and avoid the issue. It's so easy.
I know, like, we're
Just
praising this,
choreograph your
but it's
action well, and
basic.
there's no contrived nonsense. Just
And
And
this is
choreograph
really
it.
basic.
this isn't even like the cream of the crop writing. This is like base level minimum stuff. This is like just the standard.
Like the exposition, generally speaking, was fine, was pretty good. Honestly, I mean, we have
I mean, it's better than Chibnall. I'll say
there's
that much.
there's two. If I had to nitpick, there's two things that annoyed me. One is I think the pre-title explanation of where we're at doesn't have to be there, because I think the story emphasizes enough.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree, actually.
When they talked about it on the commentary track, they basically said their whole mentality of putting it in was, we want this to be like a whole jumping on point for somebody who hasn't seen
I
the
see
show
what you mean.
before. And if you haven't
I feel
seen the
like
show before, the clips and stuff maybe help. I don't know.
I feel like that scene is if you've seen the show, it's a very skippable scene. You don't have to watch it.
One thing
because
I am
they
going to
emphasize
say,
it in the episode anyways.
one thing I
It
am going
kind
to
of
say about
reminds
that
me of
scene
It
is-
actually reminds
oh,
me
you
of
go first, Connor.
they play a scene at the start of series 6 where Amy recaps series 5. It reminded me a lot of that.
Well, one thing I've got to say about this scene is we've praised like the production, how good it looks in almost every department. But this scene was not a good start, I felt. I mean, just obviously CGI David Tennant looked shit.
It looked like a character creation screen or something.
It was like only
video game screen.
Yeah, it was only marginally better than like Pertwee era CSO.
Because his body is up to the left, someone put like a graphic in front of it of like, you've selected Doctor, and it's got like his attributes and stuff.
It does. Yeah, that was poor. That was really poor.
There was that scene which, like, yeah, it doesn't look great, but like, I guess the utility of it is totally perspective based. Yeah. We don't need it. Maybe somebody else could. Maybe my family appreciate it because they hadn't watched it.
For total normies,
what I can say is that scene is not good, but it's also not canon, so I don't care.
Well, the other only bit of real clunky exposition, I think, which was unnecessary, was when Shirley, the unit officer, is like, this ship didn't crash, it landed, and it's like, yeah, we can see that. We can see on screen that this ship clearly landed. It's completely upright.
There was
Oh,
one
of
bit
course
of
we know it
exposition.
landed.
There was one bit of exposition that gave me really bad Chibnall PTSD, which was when I fucking forgot his name, Donna's husband, when all of the
Sean Temple.
fire
Sean Temple.
yeah, Sean Temple, where all the fire and flames exploding around them, and they're clearly trapped. We can see it visually, and
And he's like,
feels
"We
the need to
can't get
say,
out.
"We're trapped. We can't get out." And it's like, we didn't need to hear that. We know you could have said something else that could have been more insightful to your character or to your dynamics with the family, but you chose to do that.
It's a bit of a strange choice because they were told to leave the building, and you could have just shot an exterior scene of them running and nearly falling into the cracks or something, and
Well,
him
I mean,
grabbing onto his daughter to save her or
what I
something,
will
and
say
that would have carried the same weight.
But
You know
this
what I
is a
mean?
nitpick. It's just because my
what-
PTSD
It
I bring it
is.
up.
It is.
No.
I'm trying to be
There is
positive.
there is a better way to do it. Instead of saying we're trapped, the better way is to just have the character react as they would. Just be like, oh, obviously
Yeah,
they
exactly.
can't swear, but if I was
Have
if
them
I was
run
Sean
somewhere and
Temple,
something fall in front of them to show that something fall behind them or something to show that they're
obviously
caught.
you can't have swearing in the show, but if I was Sean Temple in that scene, I'd just be like, oh shit! Like if I saw fire in front of me, I'd just react in some way.
Who dropping an F-bomb on its 60th anniversary? Oh,
You don't need to know specifically him say we are trapped. You just need to see that he is concerned, and you can look and see what he's concerned about.
And the way he expresses that would tell us more about his character, or perhaps about his dynamics with the other characters, which is why that would be more interesting than basic exposition, which is why you don't do basic exposition. Obviously, very big nitpick, because the episode doesn't do this in almost any other scene, but it's just another example of why the Chibnall era was so bad, and this is an example of something that you might get.
This is fine tuning stuff that would just slightly improve it. It's not a nagging issue.
Yeah.
In regards to the ending and the resolution, I mean, I think fundamentally, like you said, Dylan, Russell has sometimes a problem of writing himself into a corner, and I think the whole meta crisis thing with Donna was inevitably that, because realistically, there is no way of resolving this plot thread that doesn't kill Donna doesn't feel a little cheap.
Yeah,
inevitably.
The meta crisis has issues in all of its appearances because it's just so difficult to write around. It's like it's a very, very, very it's a very gnarly concept, as I said.
How it functions is vague, and the consequences are very definite, and because of that, to get out of it feels inevitably a bit cheap. Realistically, we're all sitting there.
The stakes around every time the meta crisis has been brought up have been very big as well. Like you have the entire Dalek fleet with Davros and Journey's End, then you've got the Masters all being humans and End of Time, and now here it's like there's also some quite major stakes in terms of their surroundings. It's a big thing. And
in reality, the utility of it is, listen, we need Catherine Tate and Donna to be mostly functional Donna for the next two episodes.
You've also got to remember
how do we get it back to what she was?
You've also got to remember that the meta crisis is not something that is built off I guess you could sum up it in some way, but the meta crisis is not it's not something that you can look up in an encyclopedia and go, how does this piece of science work and how can I put it in fiction? It's very much that sort of more fantasy-based Time Lord lore that was put in New Who, in contrast to the politics of Classic Who.
Like, in regards to how it was resolved, it's like, oh, she had a kid, it transferred, oh, the kid's trans, and that had an impact. And I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I think in regards to what I was interested in the story, like, how Donna gets out of the meta crisis for me, like, I knew it was, like, for me, like, from how I knew how it was going to be told as a story, I knew it wasn't going to be particularly satisfying, so I was just like, whatever.
What I will
At least
say,
we can move on from it now.
I feel like I could just be spitballing, but I feel like we haven't actually seen the last of this. I think in the next episode and the one after, there may be a continued level of, it's not just over here. There are things that carry over into what we get after.
But I think we can all
Donna's
agree
going to beat the fat schoolboy at hopscotch using her meta crisis doctor knowledge.
Well, the
Celestial Toymaker reference.
No, I think we can all agree that the meta crisis thing was probably a very big mistake in RTD, and I think one thing I'm really hoping for his new era is that he's learned from those mistakes about writing himself into a corner, and that there isn't going to be more things like that going forward.
What did we make of? I mean, we've already sort of talked about them, but I really just want to give some special praise to David Tennant and Catherine Tate, because that scene in the Meep ship. First of all, the Meep ship. I love if you look at if you look at the actual set, you'll notice everything is at their height. Like all of the control panels and stuff is at the height of like a little teddy bear thing.
Yeah, that's a
Like
nice little detail.
because David Tennant has to like lean down to like flip
Yep.
the like turn the stuff, which is it's just a nice little detail and a good bit of production design. But like the actual, I goddamn can David Tennant act because he can emote
Yep.
so well when he's doing that
He's
stuff with Captain J. It's
he's older
so
too.
it feels so good. I don't know.
He's old. He's older as well, so there's more gravitas there.
It's like an age in his eyes for sure. He looks older.
Yeah, he's got the wrinkles and the weathered, the droopy face a little bit.
Like a sad old dog, I
All
think.
the fangirls are crying.
Oh my God, we've got David Tennant almost as old as William Hartnell now, and they're all the fangirls are like, "Where's my young boy?"
That's more of a damning indictment of how poorly people aged in the past, I think. Because David Tennant, like,
That's true.
But
David Tennant doesn't look
actually,
like he doesn't look ancient.
But it's almost like the people that would like this Doctor, this 14th Doctor, are the ones that actually like the character and not just the surface level appeal, I guess. But that being said, though, I do, in terms of surface level stuff, I do think his costume is fantastic. I love the costume.
It's better than the 13th Doctor's.
Oh,
Thumbs
for God,
up.
yeah, Jesus Christ, it's a massive improvement. But it's like clothes I would actually want to wear in some capacity. Maybe not all the time. It's a bit too formal.
I feel like
tie,
having seen some of the promotional photos for Shooty Gatwa, what he wears is clothes that I think I could wear but could never actually pull off.
Yeah, you don't have enough pizzazz to pull that off.
You're not gay enough for those clothes, Rory.
I mean, seeing some
Not
of the
ripped
photos,
enough.
seeing some of the photos, it seems like Shooty Gatwa might be a bit of a pert when he changes his clothes every story, which would be great.
Yeah, that's good. That's one common criticism I have of since the 80s of Doctor Who, where it's become like the Doctors had more of a costume than clothes.
I think it's Peter Davidson onwards where it's just the same costume constantly. Whereas if you go like to Tom Baker, he switches it up. You know what I mean? Like he changes.
It's very much a J&P thing.
Yeah, it's only the scarf that kind of stays the same with Tom Baker. All the jackets and stuff.
Style thing. He has it's like more. It's more like the Doctors have distinctive styles.
I will say I do think they did try with Capaldi to change things up. Unfortunately, with Capaldi though, it's quite volatile.
Unfortunately, they made him wear fucking hoodies.
Yeah, because some of his
costumes
are amazing, and some of his costumes are absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
What did we make of the title sequence in the soundtrack? Because we can talk about Murray Gold for a bit. I think it's.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's definitely different.
Dylan's the compare of this discussion. Dylan, want to segue?
I don't.
Unless you want to talk more about the plot.
Well, no, it's right. I didn't like Murray Gold's music back in the RTD era. I don't like it now. I feel it's too intrusive. There were loads of moments where it was playing music, and I thought that's completely unnecessary. Just let the atmosphere of the scene and the acting speak for itself. Like at the beginning, when David Tennant first comes out,
about the theme?
Theme tune, it's fine.
I like
that
theme.
bothered. Really,
it's definitely more
yeah.
Compared to the old one that he's done before. It's definitely more of like an action adventure song.
On regards to sort of the soundtrack, I thought it was okay. It didn't. It wasn't as bad It wasn't as bad as a certain colorized Daleks remake that we had a few days ago. But I see what Dylan means though. Sometimes, like, I kind of want to forget that a soundtrack is there almost.
Yeah,
like,
these days they're just
it's really hard.
Well, almost to bring it back to that Daleks colorization, I think that shows the modern mentality of they're just absolutely petrified of silence. Like every moment of that Daleks colorization had music in, even when it worked better without music. And it's the same for this episode. They're absolutely petrified of just letting the direction and the acting speak for itself. Like, you don't need to have music on the whole time. The audience is going to walk away because
on the one hand, Dylan, you do say that, but then I watched Doctor Who and the Silurians the other day, and that fucking kazoo is incessant in that story.
And that's why that story's got a bad soundtrack.
Yeah. What about in Time in the Rani, where every time there's a dramatic moment, it goes dun 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 dun.
See,
I famously love Time in the Rani. Yeah.
Dylan's more nostalgically waxing lyrical for an era when the show had no soundtrack in scenes and it was quiet, simply because they couldn't afford to put one in there.
Yeah, bloody The Abominable Snowman, which has no music, and it's just wiggle, 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 wiggle for fucking 6 episodes.
Yeah, well, the one was and I'm not a big fan of.
Like,
But like,
Anyway,
all I'm
um,
clutching with Murray Gold is that I've for the Wild Blue Yonder. There's a little clip there for the next episode that's 20 seconds long from like a little scene, and the soundtrack sounds real cool. So
yeah,
I'll say
I
that's
actually, I
what I'm
mean,
saying, but if it sounds real cool.
Wild Blue Yonder is probably the one I'm the most looking forward to because it seems like it might be something a bit
Same. It's
different.
because we know nothing about it. Nobody like there's been like I haven't seen leaks, but I have seen people say the leaks turned out to be true at least for this episode. But as people keep commenting, there's no leaks for that episode. I think a lot of it was done
Mm,
on closed sets. Apparently, they were very strict with the scripts. Nobody has any idea
yeah,
what the next episode's about, and
well,
I'm
let's hope
very
that means it's
excited.
something special.
yeah, it could be.
Unlike when Chibnall was sort of guarding everything in a shroud of secrecy, that more terrified me than excited me, to be
I mean, I
honest.
guess, I guess, the fact that they've now gotten out of the way the annoying part of having to reintroduce everything. They can now
Yeah.
just spend the entire runtime doing something with the time.
Yeah, I'm curious to see because the giggle, the third part, is going to be like a conclusion to whatever is happening
Yeah, the
here.
giggle's going to have quite a lot going on
Whereas
because it's got
Wild
Neil
Blue
Patrick
Yonder
Harris
is
and it's got Kate Stewart and it's got bloody all of Donna's family probably in it with Wilf and like there's quite a bit going on.
whereas Wild Blue Yonder just appears to be. I guess it's just going to be like an episode of. I guess like series 4. I guess
Well,
if
that'll
I had
probably
to
I
just
don't
guess
know.
what it will
that'll
be.
probably tell us the most about how well RTD's going to be able to just handle individual stories this time around the Wild Blue Yonder, and hopefully it's going to be good. Those are the stories I like, the stories where it's just something that's nice,
Well,
self-contained Doctor Who story. We'll
well,
see if it is that.
if the rumors are to be believed, it is a horror story apparently
Ooh.
with
Mm,
parental warnings. Apparently, that's the edge lord
that's
coming out.
good.
It
Get
is parental
in!
I mean,
warnings because
Don't
it's going to
the
be a
warn!
reason why
Get them
horror story.
children scarred!
the reason why that's good is because you need tonal variance in a show like this, and the tone of the Star Beast was definitely on the younger side for the most part. Whereas I think in the next episode, if it treats us with something we like, that will allow some balance.
Yeah, it
If you
was
get what I mean.
lighthearted and fun, and apparently the next two are not that. So
Okay. All right. So we're getting towards the end of the discussion now, so I think we'll just kind of wrap things up, and maybe you can just bring up anything that you wanted to bring up in your kind of conclusion if there's anything we didn't touch on. So, Roy, would you like to give your
Yeah.
final thoughts?
yeah, it was exactly what I said it would be 2 years ago when we talked about Russell T Davies coming back. I mean, this might sound harsh, but it really, I mean, because I'm gonna like just give it an out of 10 just to sort of succinct it. This to me was a solid 6.5 out of 10, which sounds harsh, but it isn't. This was like I'll probably rewatch it someday, which is more than I can say of pretty much anything for a long time. Um, I thought the production was standard was great. I thought the acting was really good. I thought the plot was fine. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was fine. It was just a competent run around for the most part with a, I suppose, fairly rushed ending when it comes to the meta crisis. And I am for the first time, and this isn't exaggeration, and some of it is genuinely just I think the fact that I've sort of engrossed myself in this stupid show again for like the last month just because it's the 60th. For the first time in, oh, I don't know, I literally can't remember. I am excited for next week's episode.
Oh,
I am
same.
looking forward. I was excited before on Saturday, earlier yesterday, which was a weird feeling to be like, I'm excited for an episode of Doctor Who, but I was. And now I'm like, I'm excited to see what happens next week. I'm really, I want to see, which
Yeah.
I couldn't
You want
say
to
for
see
a
the
long time.
consequences of Donna spilling her coffee on the TARDIS.
And this isn't just Chibnall, by the way. This is Moffat as well to an extent, especially later Moffat, where like I just everything felt so there was no anticipation. I don't know what the next episode's going to be, and I don't know tonally if I'm going to like it. I don't know if it's going to be good or not. I'm excited, and this was a 6.5 out of 10. This was a Partners in Crime, a Smith and Jones. It was good. It was okay. I enjoyed it. I would watch it, kids. Enjoy. Welcome. Please watch it. We need it to survive.
Right. So now that we've heard Rory's beg to the audience, we'll hear Connor's final thoughts.
I don't think you need to beg. I think the marketing is doing pretty damn well for itself
Yeah.
compared to previous years. Yeah, so this is interesting because, oh, actually, before I go into the conclusion, the only two other things I want to say, one was good and one was bad. The good thing is I really like the new TARDIS. I know it's minimalist and very white and doesn't have
I,
much detail.
I like it a lot as well.
Yeah,
it feels like a big.
but
It
doesn't feel
feels
very
huge
homely.
on the inside. It looks. They're gonna do a lot of cool shit with that interior. I bet.
Yeah,
in the
but
future,
the
'cause
fact
there's a
that they
lot of
can,
room.
the color lighting can change, which does mean they can play around with it a bit.
It's a
So
game of
there is
TARDIS. It's got
there's a
RGB.
canvas there. There's a canvas there to do something with it. But I'm glad because I felt like that the last TARDIS was such an ugly mess. To have
Ugh.
something a bit more clean
It sucked.
was
It
nice.
sucked. Let's not. It was rubbish. It was.
It
It
was
was
And
so
also-
the
small
worst
and cramped.
TARDIS
It had no
ever.
character.
And also just as a because the first RTD TARDIS was very grungy and cramped and it was depressed like
Yeah,
the
that wasn't a good one either.
because it's post Time War, right? This is
It was
the polar
depressed
opposite.
like Christopher Eccleston was depressed.
Yeah. Whereas this one is the polar opposite. It's the Time War is so long in the past, it's no longer even a thing, and it's big, it's white, it's expanded, it's massive. The negative I would have to say though is I think the tempo of the pacing was too rapid. I would have liked 10 more minutes of time to let things breathe a bit and
I
let it sort of
agree.
marinate and simmer. Let the character stuff with Rose Noble be a bit more developed. I think that could have worked in its favor. That's just me probably being a bit of a Classic Who simp now that I've seen all of Classic Who, by the way. But
And your favorite
overall,
episode is presumably the Leisure Hive, as it is everybody's favorite.
it's not my favorite. No, I would
Shocking.
not say that.
Shocking.
I do like the Leisure Hive though, but it's not my favorite. Anyway, the Star Beast. It in terms of Russell's output, it's actually very far from his best. I'd actually say it's probably one of his weaker outputs overall. But compared to the last 5 years of the show, it's fucking miles better than almost all of it. Like, it's so much better than Chibnall Who. It's like unbelievable how different it feels, how watchable it is, how the actors are really vibrant and charismatic, and the dialogue actually sounds like things people would say, and it's just so nice to have Doctor Who at the very least like a decent standard for once in so long.
I think it's very telling how many people like on Twitter who aren't really associated with the toxic Doctor Who Twitter community. Sorry, I mean loving and kind and good discourse, good faith discourse based Doctor Who community. Who everyone's sort of surreptitious. Everybody's going, "Oh, Doctor Who's back," which implies that it was gone, even though these people might not necessarily have expressed that with Chibnall. It's like we all knew
Yeah,
that it was go. We all know what it's back, baby. 6.5 out of 10.
All right,
Sorry, Connor.
Yeah,
Sorry, you
yeah.
tell us what your rating is. Let's do ratings. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in that same mind about 6.5. That sounds about right to me. It's far from great, but it's something that's actually watchable, and that's more than I can say for almost all of Chibnall.
Okay, I'm surprised by how much I'm going to agree with Connor on an RTD episode. I thought it was, it was intended as an opener, and it does that fairly competently as a story in its own right. Not really a whole lot going on there. Fairly basic plot, which is far too rushed. With some, even though there are a lot of really good bits of characterization, there's a couple of slightly iffy moments of characterization which also hold it back. So I think very much in agreement about a longer runtime is massively needed. The meat was fun, but again, the plot was rushed in that department. I enjoyed David Tennant as the Doctor. I'm glad that he doesn't have that same level of angst he had by the end of his first era, so that's good to see. I'm interested to see where it goes next. But this is an episode I will probably never rewatch. Not because it's bad, just because its purpose was to be an opener, and it doesn't really have much beyond that. So it's not something that I'm particularly interested in watching again. But for what it's worth, I enjoyed it while watching it. I had a good time while watching it, but it's not one I'm ever gonna revisit. So on that note, I'd say 5 out of 10. Fully mediocre story. It's very competently written. It works as an opener. Has some flaws which really hold it back from being something that interests me, but it's fine. And I think next week is going to be really getting to the proper good story.
5 is average, right? Like
Exactly,
5 out of 10 is your average baseline, and you go above it. But really, the real question is, and we all need to discuss it very earnestly here. I think we need to add another hour to the runtime. Is how woke was it though?
Oh, it was so woke. It's broke.
Super woke.
So coke,
Doctor
it's
Who's
low.
dead.
So
Doctor Who's dead and woke.
It's
boys.
it's
woke.
bespoke.